Hello everybody, welcome to Mr. Go, Living in Diversity Social Study Chapter 4.1. What is diversity? Today we're going to explore the issue of diversity, and this is part of issue 2. In chapter 4, we'll be exploring what is diversity, followed by chapter 5, why is there greater diversity in Singapore, and it's part of a series of videos covering is harmony achievable. We are exploring this question. Is harmony really achievable? Well, we shall find out in the next few minutes. Let's take a look. What is diversity? Before we can even explore the idea of diversity and whether it's achievable, we need to know what is diversity. In Singapore, there is really a lot more diversity than what is mentioned here, and we really focus on 4 ideas and 4 issues. They are nationality, race and ethnicity, religion, and socio-economic status. Of course, there are more, but we will be exploring these main 4 in Singapore. Let's take a look at nationality. What is nationality? Nationality involves having a sense of belonging, where you belong to a nation, or some say a country, and share common experience with others of the same nationality, and that is important. So it consists of 2 parts, one sense of belonging, the other sharing a common experience. And to prove that you are a citizen of a country, you need to have legal documents like passport. They only issues to individuals who are legally recognized as citizens of a country. People of the same nationality actually share a common history. In Singapore, we all know Lee Kuan Yew, who is the founder of Singapore, and a set of tradition. We have practices that all of us actually share in and probably have participated at one point of time in our lives. And language, Singlish, is that really bad? Meh. So the idea that Singlish actually brings people together is actually an important point to consider as well. And they live together in a particular geographical area. In this case, the south of Malaysia and the north of Indonesia. And this builds a sense of belonging because we share a number of factors that we have in common, and this shapes one identity. And this shared identity is also known as the national identity. Let's take a look. Expressions of national identity can be reflected through lifestyle choices such as sports, cuisines, and music. Like some countries, they were a great fan of football, as you can see in the picture where you see Brazil, and you know that they are part of the country, and people may feel more comfortable with members of the same nationality as they identify with a common experience. So when you speak about Singlish, the other Singaporeans will know about Singlish. Attitudes and beliefs like kiasuism, if you were to speak to a Singaporean, they probably would have heard it and maybe carry the attitude as well. If we look at the series of dishes, I would like you to consider what would be a national dish of Singapore. May not be official, but if you were to talk about this dish to another person, what would it be? First, you have the Wiener Schnitzel, you have the lamb claftico from Greece, and you have roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, commonly known from England, and you have the tandoori chicken, originally from India. So which dish would you most commonly identify with and probably would recognize it as a national dish of Singapore? For me, I would definitely recognize tandoori chicken because Indian culture has really been an integral part of Singapore, and I really believe that at some point of time of life, you probably would have tasted it. You might not like it, but you know that it's part of Singapore culture. I'm not denying that there are other dishes you can find, such as the other 3 dishes, but it would not be something that most Singaporeans would identify with. Let's take a look at New Zealand. New Zealand actually call themselves Kiwis, and rugby is their national sport. And that is a Maori dance, if you see that, with the flashing of the tongue. Quite scary indeed. And they will watch games when the national team All Blacks play against our country, and they will definitely do the dance before every match against their opponent, probably to scare them. If you take a look at our team, they are really scary, but that is part of their Kiwi bond, and one of their traits is that they love rugby and they all admire All Blacks. And it's one of the top teams in the world. So this is their pride and their joy. In a traditional practice that all Kiwis are familiar with is the haka, and it's a Maori warrior dance which they will do before every rugby competition, and this will be something that they identify with. Let's take a look at Brazil. Soccer is a national pastime, which means that if you're there, rich or poor, you would probably play soccer at one point of time in their lives, be it male or female. To some, soccer is considered a part of their heritage. In fact, that will be what they will be feeling as well. Many young boys start learning the fundamentals of a game from a very young age, and by the time they reach teenager or a young adult, they will be probably very well versed in the sport. So they play this game in the hope that they will someday become great soccer players like Pelé, Zico, Ronaldo, and many others. So soccer is played on many Brazilian beaches, streets, and playing fields, and you can see them everywhere, and that will be part of their culture and something they can probably identify with. So let's take a look at Singapore. Singapore, we declare our National Day on the 9th of August when we separate from Malaysia to mark its independence and progress as a nation. So on this day, we will celebrate National Day. So Singaporeans also respect multiracial and multi-religious practices, and we all share a common love for food. Be it in the hawker center, in restaurants, in food court, we all love the food and it's across culture deeply. If you take a look at the picture behind, you would probably recognize them. While if you don't, you can probably Google them and find them as well. There was this incident in Singapore where one person who was coming back and he's supposed to be quarantined, but during his quarantine due to COVID-19 situation, he actually went out and had his bak kut teh, which is pork dish, and he really loves his food and he would actually break his quarantine, which is punished later. But that shows how much he really loves his food, and they can definitely show his trait as a Singaporean of his love for Singaporean food. Even though he's not supposed to do it, but he still do it nonetheless. Next, Singlish. Is Singlish really that bad, meh? When you have a commitment to bilingualism, is in Singapore, we do practice both language, both English, which is our official language, and your mother tongue language. If you're Chinese, you'll be taking Mandarin. You are Malay, you'll be taking Malay as well. If you're Indian, or you will be taking Tamil. The use of common language is English, and Singaporean version of English, we call it Singlish. And we have certain characters that other foreigners may not really understand. Words like meh, law, la, all this are part of Singaporean version of English. So how else would you think our shared national identity can influence our identity as Singaporeans? So next, we talk about race and ethnicity. A very interesting topic. So what is race? We see this word bombarded everywhere, but what exactly does it mean? So race, according to definition, is a classification of people according to physical characteristics that define a person's race. So we are looking at the color of the skin, we are looking at hair, we are looking at eyes, we are looking at bone, and even jaw structure. So if you look at a white and Asian and black, if you look at the bone structure, it looks similar but different. If you look at the nose cavity, it actually is very different. We are actually going beyond just the color of skin, which most people can name you, but we're actually going deep and beyond into the bone structure. So what is ethnicity? Since we know race has something to do with the physical structure and outside external appearance, what is ethnicity? Is it something similar to race, or is it something different? Ethnicity is one ancestry, cultural practice, language, custom, food, and dressing, how you dress up, that makes you part of the ethnic group. Your food, everything that surrounds you, your life, your culture, it really brings out your ethnicity and in a way shape you. So let's take a look at the Chinese race. Communities of people in China may have similar physical features of Chinese race, but they're actually of different ethnicity. Please take note. And they have unique costume practices and custom. Let's take a look. You have the Miao group, you have the Yugu group, you have the Hui group, and you have the Zhuang group. So if you take a look, they may look similar, but their costumes are different, not because they want to wear differently, but because this is part of their culture. So there is something quite important to take note. Let's take a look at Malay race. The Malay race actually made of different ethnicity. You have the Batak, you have the Dayak, you have the Minangkabau, and you have the Balinese. So there are actually a number of costumes that you see. They are actually different. Some are more spikier, some actually are flatter, and some are more feathery. They actually represent the different groups that make up the Malay race. So It is something quite complex because when we are talking about race and ethnicity, sometimes it might overlaps, and that overlaps area is complex because you can't really define it. That's where people will have confusion, but sometimes they might not even overlap. So do take note. And ethnicity can actually differ within the same racial group. So when we look at a group such as a Chinese, a Malay, or even an Indian group, inside there may be different ethnicities. So to call them the same would be really problematic and complex at the same time. This could possibly be a combination as well. So race and ethnicity shape our identity as we belong to a particular race and ethnic community, and we might even be of a certain race but brought up in a different culture and thus have a different ethnicity. So this practice and beliefs of this community actually influence and shape our lives. So let's take a look at the case of Japan. Japan is one of few areas in the world where race and ethnicity actually coincide. They refer to the same group of people. What is your race? Japanese. What is your ethnicity? Japanese too. And Japanese could refer to both race and ethnicity. So 98% of people in Japan, they are of Japanese race. We have 2% which are the minority. They engage in common cultural activities. Remember the ethnicity part, cultural part, the viewing of the cherry blossoms, which are extremely beautiful. And they also have their own media culture such as manga, comics, kawaii culture, and the Japanese pop and cosplay. These are so popular that they actually spread worldwide. Most Singaporeans have their race indicated in their identity cards, such as this person, his race is called Javanese, and that is his race. There are 4 main categories such as CMIO, which is Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others. And it's important that Singaporean uses this because Singapore policies are based on that, such as housing. And these racial markers have been used to shape policies in the areas of education, housing, and welfare. And this is quite important because they have major influence over the lives of different races. They actually have the area of education, you have an area of housing, and the area of welfare. And it's necessary to bring out different communities together because if they have different policies for different groups, that means that the treatment will be different. So if they are treated differently, they might feel that they are separate from their group, they are not united as Singaporeans, they are actually Malays or Indians or Chinese instead. So it is important to bring them together, especially when we are building our nation. That's why in a country, they have different races in a housing estate. Over the years, different races actually marry together and the child is of mixed race. And this becomes problematic because if let's say your father is Chinese, your mother is a Malay, then would you consider yourself a Chinese or a Malay, or both Chinese and Malay, or half Chinese, half Malay? It becomes quite complicated. So to understand and try to allow for that, we have double barrel race option. So where it's indicated that you're born to parents of different race, revised on 1st of January 2011. This lady, Lillian Rodriguez, her race is Eurasian Chinese. But something to take note is that which race that is placed first does have implication when you are applying for certain groups. So do take note, the order does matter. And they reflect the race of both parents, and before this the parents must actually choose their race, which is really a tough choice because that will mean that the other half will be ignored. So in this case, let's throw a spanner into the mix. What happens if she marries another gentleman who is of a Malay and Indian descent, and their children will be 1/4 of each? So do we call it Eurasian, Chinese, Malay, Indian? That will be one problematic case which we don't have a solution. Unfortunately, they do not allow for as of this moment. Perhaps we should call her Singapore. Diversity in terms of race and ethnicity means that different races and ethnic groups, they actually celebrate many customs in Singapore. And this is important because when we celebrate other customs, we do gain an understanding of their customs and celebration, and this will allow you to have a better understanding. So different races actually celebrate Chinese New Year. They mark the end of the winter month and the start of the new year for the Chinese lunar calendar. And through community events as house visit, But due to COVID-19 nowadays, we seldom have such gatherings. But after that, hopefully, we will have a mass celebration. So we have come to the end of chapter 4 of part 1. So stay tuned for the next video where we will be discussing part 2, the other 2 factors which makes up diversity in Singapore. And that's it, and thank you and have a nice day.